The clock tower. The brush flowing across the canvas calmed her anxious mind enough. Just enough that she could finally breathe. She had been tossing and turning for some time before eventually she had given up on sleep entirely and retreated to her studio. With each sweep of the brush, her heart rate slowed, and another piece of her nightmare retreated. Everything came together easily as she painted herself back to normal. Piece by piece, she added the paint. Slowly the picture appeared as she processed the disturbing dream. There hadn't been much to it, not really. And yet after awakening it had been impossible for her to find sleep once again. Her dream had started out as a memory. Nothing more than a half-forgotten road from over a decade before. She had been walking down that once well-known street on her way to a familiar destination. For weeks she had walked that path religiously, a continual pilgrimage to and from this place, looking for answers, to the hospital and back. The nightmare hadn't touched upon what she remembered the most of that time. That portion of her life that she had tried so hard to forget after all these years. Instead, all she had seen was the clock tower. As she trudged that well-worn path, it marked the halfway point of her journey. It was no surprise that it had stuck in her memory for so long. Amongst the massive Victorian hospital, it stood out. Slightly apart from the rest, its tower jutted out of the top of it like some clawed figure pointing up towards the sky. The lower windows and doors were boarded up. The wood in the panes decaying away slowly as nature tried in vain to reclaim it. The higher windows were empty holes into darkness. The merest hint of greenery poking out of a couple, the only visible sign of life inside. The ravens circled around the spire, but never once had she seen them swoop inside. The clock faces themselves, all 5 of them around the 5-sided tower, stood still, sitting eternally on 3 o'clock. Despite the fact that she had always made the journey in daylight, in her dream, this place was shrouded in darkness. The normally ever-present sounds of the city were gone as she walked the path alongside the abandoned building. Stopping beside the boarded-up door, she looked up towards the pentagonal tower. The space above the clocks, where the big brass bell had once sat, was dark. And yet somehow, she could see the clock faces clearly. Suddenly, as she stood looking up into the stark white faces, her attention was pulled upwards. Sharply her eyes darted to the gaping open space of the window just above the central clock. This window, positioned just above her head, glowed with light. An amber flickering light, like the flame of a candle, greeted her in the empty darkness. Tick. The soft sound echoed through the silence of the empty city, forcing her attention back to the clock face. Tock. This time she saw the movement of the hand across the brilliant white clock face nearest her. Tick. The minute hand was pulling itself across the crumbling Roman numerals as if it were a second hand. Tock. She snapped her sight away from the clock just in time to see the figure's fleeting appearance at the window above her. Nothing more than a shadowy silhouette. She couldn't be sure exactly what she had seen, but it definitely hadn't been a raven. That was when she had awoken.